Welcome everyone to the Essential Guide to Progressive Web Apps. Uh, Thank you for taking time out of your busy day to attend this webinar be with me here today. My name is Tony Graham. I am the product manager for LANSA. And just to give you a little bit of background about myself before we get going, I come from a developer background in RPG and .NET, where I specialized in integration. And then as an IS manager, I specialized in modernization. And now I am here talking to you guys about progressive web apps. So again, thank you again for joining us. I only want to take about 30 minutes of your time, so let's kind of get it kicked off and get going. This is just going to be the agenda for today. We're going to talk about what are PWAs, which are progressive web apps. We'll go into features and benefits, various approaches to developing PWAs, and then determining if a PWA is right for you. As amazing as PWAs are, they are not the the answer to every application out there. So with that said, let's get into this and let's go over what are progressive web apps. So progressive web apps. Oh, real quick, sorry about this. I do want to mention questions. There is a question and answer tab you have. Go ahead and type your questions in anytime during the webinar. I will have a little bit of time at the end to address some of those questions, and any questions that we do not get to, we will get back with you and we will answer them and we'll follow up with them. So feel free to chime in with your questions at any time. Okay, so with that out of the way, let's get into what are progressive web apps. So progressive web apps are web apps, basically websites created with extra components, a service worker, and an app manifest that allow them to be installable, work with little or no network connection, and have access to the device's native features. And once installed, they look and feel like a native app. So the highlights of that. So with a PWA, an application built with emerging web technologies that rival and feel the functionality of a native app. So that's really the definition. I mean, that's really how you can think of a PWA. A PWA is an optimized version of a website with native application functionality. And that's kind of the easiest way to visualize it, to kind of break it down. A progressive web app combines the best of a native app with the best of a web app. So what do we mean, right, when we say, well, what's the best of each, right? So if we look at this chart, we see reach at the bottom and functionality to the side. So reach, a website has maximum reach. If we think of a website that is the face of your company, that is where you drive traffic, that is accessible across all devices, it doesn't matter the operating system, it doesn't matter what device you're on. A website, if you have internet connectivity and you have a device, you can reach it. So website is the ultimate in reach. However, a native app is the ultimate in functionality. If we think of a native app, it is built for the device it is ran on. And so a native app has the functionality to interact with that device, to make, to use the camera, to use memory, and to use all these different device features in an optimized performance manner. So native app, maximum functionality, website, maximum reach. Now a native app, while it does have reach, it doesn't have near the reach of website. Because if you have an iOS app, you're only going to reach iOS end users, right? And so it doesn't have the reach, even though, say, like the Apple App Store has a huge reach, it's still not as great as a website. So when we look at the PWA on this chart, because it's simply a advanced website, so to speak, it has the reach of a website. It can be, search engine optimized. Google can find it really easy if that's how, you want to build it. And so it has this reach of a website. Now, it's not completely as high as native application functionality. It's lower on the chart. It's getting there. Will it ever be as functional as a true native app? Probably not. There's just certain things a native app is going to be able to access that a PWA, at least for the foreseeable future right now, cannot. But it rivals it nearly in functionality. There is a lot a PWA can do that a native app can do. And so that really is what a progressive web app is. So if we let's look at features now. So what features? What makes a progressive web app? So a progressive web app is installable. It is less resource intensive than a native app, and we'll kind of go over both of those here in a little bit in a little further detail. It utilizes browser memory, so it has access to browser memory, and it can utilize that, especially with the next feature, offline capabilities. Progressive web apps, one of their main features, one of the main highlights, one of the main reasons why you'll use a progressive web app is its offline capabilities. And we'll talk about more about that in a little bit too, but just as an overall feature, offline capabilities utilizing the browser memory. It also has access to device features such as camera, NFC, and Bluetooth. And so, one PWA runs on any device on any operating system. So I was talking about offline capabilities. So PWAs work offline. That means it has at least some functionality with little to no internet connectivity. Now, I say at least some functionality because how much functionality you want offline is basically up to you. It's basically you develop how much functionality you want. If you just simply want it to come up, show a picture, and say, can't do much right now, fine. You can develop it that way. If you want to develop a complex service worker, and we'll talk about service worker in a little bit, you can have as much functionality as you want, almost the same as being online. And so it's really up to the developer, but you have the ability to create highly functional, highly complex applications, not with no internet connectivity. And you're going to access this offline data through the browser with an IndexedDB and a caching API. So there again, offline functionality, really a key feature of progressive web apps. So another key feature is updating. So updating a progressive web app is super simple. There's an update API that'll check for the latest version and compare it to the installed version. So if the PWA is not on the latest release, the app will simply ask the user to reload the page, and when that page reloads, the latest version will be installed. Now compare that to how you'd have to update an app through an app store and go through the whole process of updating it. Then the user has to, if they don't have it automatically updated, they have to go get the latest update. It's not the case with progressive web apps. You can set a progressive web app pretty much to update itself with the user's permission. You say this version's out of date, reload the page, and every user has the latest and greatest progressive web app. Service worker. So one of the distinguishing features of a progressive web app, one of the main components is a service worker. So think of the service worker as a background script. It is separate from the web page. It's think of it as a proxy between the web app and the network. So it's going to sit in the middle and make calls to the network and use APIs to grab data from the web app, and it's its go-between. It uses static assets that are cached, so the page loads faster. So you can say, you want this certain data ready to go when the page loads, and it can go grab that. It's going to update in the background, so it's asynchronous. So it's not going to lock up your main thread. It can simply do as much or as little work as you want it to in the background. It is what loads the data for your application, and again, it is what allows the offline or low no connectivity functionality. And it is only HTTPS. That is the only protocol that is allowed for PWAs. And so when you combine the HTTPS with this being a proxy, not having direct access to the web page, it is very secure. So the other main component of a web app, progressive web app, is the app manifest. This is simply a JSON file that stores data such as like app icons. It allows the app to be installed on the device, and it also describes how the app should behave when installed. So if you want your progressive web app to look like a native app, so you don't want the URL bar, you want it when it comes up just to look exactly like a native app, you're going to specify that kind of those kind of details in the app manifest. So I've been talking about working offline. And so there's some strategies, some network strategies that are available for your progressive web app. Now, depending how you develop your progressive web app, kind of determines what's available. So for instance, if you're using Angular, you're only going to have like two options, which is the maximum performance or maximum freshness for your data. So if you want your phone or your device to perform, the best it can, so you're not sitting there making calls, that's one option. Or if you want the latest and greatest data all the time, that's going to be another option. However, there's several options available for progressive web apps. Network first, that is simply saying when when you hit the icon and you bring the progressive web app up, it's going to go to the network. It's going to go grab data from the network. Then if that's not there, it'll say, okay, network's not available. Now let's go to cache. You can say cache first, which is whatever data I have already stored is fine to load the app. So I'm going to use that data to load the app. So the app's going to load faster. And then it'll say, now go out to the network and grab any data that needs to be updated. Stale while revalidate, that lets you put a time in on how often you want the data to be refreshed. So you can give it a time. If you need the data updated every 5 minutes, every 10 minutes, every few days, every few seconds, however, that really gives you control over how important it is that data needs to be refreshed. And then there's onlys. So you have a network only, which is don't ever use the cache, always go to the network. And cache only, which would be like once your progressive web app is done, it will never need the network again. Just simply use the cache that's stored in there. And so those are the different strategies, network strategies that are available depending on how you develop your progressive web app. So now let's talk about the benefits. And here's I love this part. This is amazing because you don't need to go through the app stores, right? So you don't need an iOS app. You don't need a Google Play app or several Google Play apps, depending what Google or what Android device they have. And you don't need to create a Windows store app either. You're bypassing all the app stores. You're simply creating one application that is going to any device. So you're completely skipping the entire app store process. So progressive web apps, they utilize browser technology, so they run on any OS. So one PWA will run on Android, will run on Apple, and will run on Windows. That same PWA, because it utilizes browser technology, will run on any device. So a tablet, a phone, a desktop, or laptop. PWAs are responsive, and so the device does not matter. So if you have an Android phone and a Apple tablet, great. You're going to have the same experience. You're going to develop one time. So if you think about having certain devices at work, certain devices at home, if you have to use this progressive web app on different devices, it's going to be the same experience for your end user. What's the other nice thing about it is you're developing it one for everybody. So reduce development time compared to native apps. When you are only developing one application, so you're not developing an iOS app, you're not having to go through the iOS process. You're not going to have to go back and redo that iOS because a device, a new device comes out, old device isn't supported. So if you think about your overall development time is greatly reduced compared to native apps. Same thing with costs, because you're not going through the web store, you're not going through the approval process. You're not having to make sure this device works on different versions of iOS. You don't have to create that Google app. You don't have to create the iOS app. Your costs are greatly reduced compared to developing native apps. And the maintenance and upkeep as well. Like I showed before, updating is simply pushing out one update, and all your end users will get that update. And so you don't have to go through the App Store update process. You don't have to keep up with iOS made these changes. Now I have to make these changes to my application. Android has this new flavor. Now I need to make updates again. But now I have to change an app for some old Android devices. All of that is pushed to the side, and you are simply maintaining one device that is going to run on any browser, almost any browser. We'll get to that here in a second. Well, actually right now. So one PWA runs across all devices, operating system, and most major browsers. Now I say most, Google and Microsoft are leading the way. They are really the ones pushing for the PWA technology. And so PWAs perfectly optimized for Google Chrome and, Microsoft Edge. Now, Apple, their app store is a huge, revenue generator. So they don't want you bypassing the app store. However, they do allow progressive web apps in certain instances. They have some restrictions because they really want you to create a native application so they can have revenue. However, PWAs are becoming more and more popular. They're gaining more and more. Obviously, when you see the benefits, so Apple will have to eventually say, okay, if they want to keep up with Google and Microsoft, and people are creating progressive web apps, they'll have to loosen their restrictions. But so understand right now, Safari, there is some restrictions. Google and Microsoft, you'll have no issues. And again, one app means less code to maintain, less apps to maintain, and drastically lower your costs. So here's some other pretty cool benefits about progressive web apps. They're shareable. So they are shareable through a SMS, through email, and directly on a website. It's simply a link because think of it, it's a website. And so any way you can share a website, you can share progressive web apps. Simply, if you want to, like I said, email that to somebody, you can put it in an email. Through a text, you can share that as well. Even on a website, if you want to promote your progressive web app on a website, you just simply put the link on there. And so if you think about how easy that is to share compared to a native app, right? You're not sending them to the app store where if they don't have an app store account, then they have to put in their credentials. You're bypassing all that. And, every step you give a user, so much percent is going to fall out, right? It's that low barrier. A progressive web app, you share one link and they are running it instantly. You're going to have push notifications. Again, they update only one app and it's instantly. And the other thing is that seamless user experience across all devices. So, think of a website when you sitting on your Apple, sitting on your PC, you're going to a website. It's pretty much the same user experience. And that's what a progressive web app is. So a user on an Android won't have a different experience than a user on iOS because of the way the OS is set up, because the way the device is set up. They're going to have the same experience across all devices. Okay, so let's talk about some development approaches to progressive web apps. I really see there's three viable approaches to it, and that's traditional programming, using open source, traditional low code, and then using our visual LANSA hybrid low code. These are progressive web apps are pretty much optimized websites. So you're going to develop the user interface on a progressive web app the exact same way you would a web page. You're going to use HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. All the libraries and frameworks for JavaScript, you'll be able to use them for progressive web apps. So that part doesn't change. Now, what you do have to, when you're doing the open source, when you're doing it traditional programming language, you're going to have to create the service worker in JavaScript and the app manifest in JSON. Now, the service worker, can get very complex. So the amount of JavaScript you need to know greatly increases with the complexity of the application. And then, of course, if you're going to connect it to the service, to a server, you're going to need the server side as well, your Node.js, your Python, Java. And so, and if you are set up for it, if you have the resources, open source, traditional programming language is a viable option to create a progressive web apps. Everything's out there. You just kind of have to try to put it together all yourself. So if you go with traditional low code, if you use low code to utilize the front end development, so you're going to speed up that front end development. Instead of developing in all the different languages, you use low code and your front end is done much faster. However, a lot of the traditional low code platforms have limited or no availability to enable PWA in the platform. So you're still going to have to kind of develop your PWA outside the low code platform, kind of using the same method as you did as doing traditional languages. And then again, you'll have to develop server-side functionality outside of your low-code platform. So a traditional low-code platform has the ability to speed up a progressive web app compared to, your traditional programming method. Now, just gonna, so when you look at our Visual LANSA hybrid low-code, so Visual LANSA, we will automatically create the service worker and app manifest for you. It is a one-click PWA creation. You simply develop your web app and you select a dropdown and you select app manifest and service worker, and your web app is now a progressive web app. And then on top of that, you're going to be able to drag and drop your cached assets. So you simply take it from our repository, drop it over on the assets to be cached, and now you have cached your assets for your progressive web app as well. And we're ever expanding on our progressive web apps. So you're going to be able to utilize low code to access device features. That's coming in Visual LANSA. And so we're really pushing to make PWAs as easy as possible to develop. They are very powerful. I'm a big advocate of PWAs, and so we want to make it as easy as possible for you to develop a PWA and get it out there to your end user, whoever that may be. And along with one-click PWA creation, we have one-click caching strategy. So that network first, cache first, you're not going to have to code that. You're simply going to click a checkbox and say, I want network first, I want cache first. Just to highlight how we do it, this is simply it. You go to offline support, and then you have your app manifest and service worker, and you click on that and you have created a progressive web app. So that's the progressive web app part, but some added benefits then to the hybrid low code approach is you're going to develop the client side and server side in the same IDE. So you're going to use the same language for both client side, server side development. You're going to use our DMLX language combined with low code, and then you stay. So not only do you enable PWAs easier and create PWAs easier, you're going to create the entire application easier because you're not bouncing back and forth to create some server code in this development environment, create some front end in this development environment. You just create everything right inside this in our environment. And what's great about that is you don't need to be familiar with the modern web languages or technologies. So you can create a progressive web app without knowing all the latest and greatest technologies behind that progressive web app. We simply handle all that for you, and you don't worry about it. So are PWAs right for you? Obviously, there's a lot of benefits. There's a lot of features that are great for PWAs, but they're still not like perfect and or even right for every situation. And so I like to go over some use cases first to highlight what progressive web apps have done for some pretty big companies. And so like Pinterest and Starbucks, I think these are two pretty cool ones, and they kind of highlight different benefits and different reactions to the end users. So Pinterest only had 1% of their visitors converting to signups for their apps. So somebody would come to their web page, but only 1% of them would actually go on to install their iOS application or Android application. What they found is when they went to a PWA, not only did they have a 60% increase in user engagement, but they had a 44% increase in ad revenue. So what they found out was people just used the progressive web app more than they did the native app because it's much easier to bring up. You don't have to go through the app store. If you want to see, they found out when users just want to see something really quick, you go to Pinterest to see it. A progressive web app was perfect because there was nothing the end user had to do except for go to the progressive web app. And then if you look, when I talk about less resources, their PWA only requires 150 kilobyte as opposed to the higher, 9.6 or 56 megabyte for the native apps. Now, I know you might say, well, even at 56, megabit, that's not crazy big, but not every end user has the latest and greatest phone, and so. And as apps, everybody has the app and more apps, and we get app fatigue. Apps take up more and more space. So by simply allowing the end user not to use the device resources, they're also more apt to use a progressive web app. So Starbucks, they highlight the offline capability and being sensitive to data usage. So customers can browse the menu and the nutrition information and even customize their orders with no internet connection. So you can do all this without even being connected to the internet. And so you can create your order. When you connect to the internet, you can send it and then disconnect your data. So the people that are really conscious about data, Starbucks found out that was actually pretty important, because Starbucks doubled their daily active users by going to a PWA. The other thing Starbucks highlights is only your most loyal customers use a native application. So native apps, that's why right now, like progressive web apps is part of a bigger picture currently. If you're a B2C and you have customers that you really want to cater to, a native app still offers a better user experience for customization, for personalization. And that is your main customers that are looking for that. That's your native app. However, what Starbucks found out is there were so many more people that just wanted to use their app without going through an app store, and they doubled their online daily users just by going to a progressive web app. And there again, theirs is a lot lighter to install as well. And then two other ones I want to highlight is Forbes and Trivago. So Forbes had a mobile solution that wasn't the greatest. They needed a faster experience for their end users. And so they rebranded their mobile experience with a PWA, and they registered 43% more users per session. They had a increase in ad viewability, and they tripled their scroll depth. So a progressive web app is a better experience than a simply just a mobile optimized web page. And then Trivago, when they went to a PWA, they increased their user engagement by 150%. And what's interesting with Trivago is their new PWA actually loads faster than their existing native app. Plus, it still has push notifications and that offline mode. And so now they actually have customers click on the hotel's offers twice as much than with their native app. But what's interesting about that, what I think Trivago highlights is, because of if you do that cache first and you just go out and grab the data that's in cache, and you have some static data already loaded in there, that app loads super fast. And so you can actually get better performance than a native app by using a PWA. So our PWAs right for you. So here's some key questions to ask for a native app, right? Is this app for your most loyal customers? Is this a premium quality service and upsells, right? If you have in-ad app revenue, right? In-app purchases, and that's what you're relying on for revenue, and you need that, then a native app is the only way to go. That, no doubt about it, right? If this is for your top customers, quality, need the upsells, native app. And then, if you're looking to develop a PWA, make sure that the feature you most need in your application is available in a PWA, because not everything in a native application is available in a PWA. And there are some things in PWA that's still in sort of like a beta mode. And so they're not ready for production. So before you say, yes, we're creating 100% PWA, make sure what you want your app to do is available in a PWA. And then if you have different roadmaps, so if you have an iOS, an Android, and a Windows roadmap, if you want to offer different experiences to each one of those users, then it doesn't make sense to combine. It doesn't make sense to streamline that experience to one experience across all those devices, right? You don't want the iOS user to have the same experience as an Android user for whatever reason. So it doesn't make sense to do that. And so if you have different roadmaps for each of those, then native apps is still the way to go, because you're already developing for those specific users. And then need to harness the full power of the device. So, if it is graphics intensive, if it's CPU intensive, this is where you think of video games a lot, right? Like there is just certain things that progressive web apps can't access or can't use 100%. And so if you need that absolute 100% power, then you have to go with a native app still. Now that's closing the gap. Will it ever be one for one? Will a progressive web app ever fully replace the App Store? No, there will just be certain applications that will need to be native apps. Progressive web apps are great replacements for certain instances right now. But that's where you really have to define what you're trying to do and then see if the progressive web app is right for you. So I talked a lot about like end users, B2C sort of things, right? Like how progressive web apps are so great in that situation. But so something else you want to ask yourself, so is there a possibility the end user will be in an area with little or no internet connectivity? And this is where internally it would make sense to create a progressive web app. So if you think of a logistics, right, that delivery, that truck, whatever mode of transportation, anything's being delivered, it is probably going to run through an area that does not have internet connectivity, or it does not have the best internet connectivity. And that's where PWA will outperform a native app, right? Because it has that offline capability. If you think of field service, you're sending somebody out to the field, they need to perform some sort of action. They can download get all the information they need ahead of time. They can go out to the field. If there's no internet connectivity, no big deal. They can still fill out their forms. They can still fill out their work orders. And then when they get back into an area with connectivity, they simply upload it. And that's the same thing with maintenance. I come from the maintenance background, and even as technology as awesome it is today, you run into areas of a factory that is just so much interference from the heavy machinery. You don't have Wi-Fi. Well, a maintenance tech can get his work orders, can get his schematics downloaded, go out, fix the machine, and then do whatever he needs to do, right on that application, on that device. And then when he comes back in, he can reconnect, or gets back into an area with connectivity. So, internally, one of the things you want to think about is being able to use this offline, right? That is a huge benefit to a PWA. And so if you're not creating an app, if you're creating an app internally, and it falls under this area, I think that's a great time to look at a progressive web app. And then there's still a few others. So still undecided, right? So you're not sure, should I go native? Should I go progressive web app? Well, if it's going to be the same, why not go with the method that reduces costs? The progressive web app reduces development costs. So if everything's the same across the board, you might tip PWA because of cost. The other, factor you can factor in is end users and departments can choose their own hardware. So if sales wants their Surface, the shipping and receiving, they want iPads, quality wants Android, they can all be happy. You can let them have all their own hardware, whatever they choose, and you're going to develop one app for them. So instead of forcing everybody into, an Apple device, instead of forcing everybody into Android, instead of forcing everybody into Windows, you simply let them choose what they want, and you just develop one application for all those people. So it's really easier. It makes everybody happier in the end. You're developing one application, and people are going to be able to get their updates faster. If you need to change something on the fly, you change it, update it, they download it, and everything's done. And then a faster adoption rate of PWAs. So there's no App Store sign up. You're bypassing that whole step or multiple steps. And so people are just able to use or faster to adapt to a progressive web app. So that brings you to the end. If you have any questions, if you want to learn more about progressive web apps or Visual LANSA, please contact sales@lansa.com.